Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the West Virginia Archives and History Library. This is our Thursday evening lecture. We do have a few announcements that's coming up. Our next lecture on the 20th of November is Firearms Throughout West Virginia's Early History. That's by the curator of the West Virginia Museum downstairs, Mr. Jim Mitchell. On our upcoming lectures for 2015, we're still in the process of putting those together, and we'll get the word out as soon as we can. You can go to our website and find a lot of those. Once we do start getting them posted, you can find those on our website. They'll be on the right-hand column. And there's some other things in our website if you want to take a look through those. A lot of databases and things like that, especially for the students. Some of the things that you may be looking at, and Golden Horseshoe and those things. Tonight, Anne Montague was born Anne Frazier in Huntington in 1939. She left the state at age 21 and spent several decades learning in many settings: academics, business, nonprofit, and government. Always hoping to return to West Virginia to contribute her know-how and show how to the place she calls home. While gone from West Virginia, her journeys took her into research and learning theory, several jobs in business, 2 MA degrees, which she completed without having to finish the BA. Her love of creating and managing projects started in the late 1980s in Boston, when she helped scientists, companies, and the government commercialize technology. Anne has been creating, managing, and growing the Rosie the Riveter project for almost 6 years. Phase 1 of the Rosie the Riveter project has been to learn to know what it takes for a community or region to honor and educate its Rosies. Phase 2 is about to begin, where work done here in West Virginia is shared with America and communities nationwide, and are guided to know and educate the Rosies. And we'll introduce you to the Rosies here tonight, whom we are honored to have and share with you. Please refer to your agenda for the mission of thanks, plain and simple, and the goals of the Rosie the Riveter Program. Please welcome Anne.
I am so pleased to be here this evening, folks, because it's a celebration in a private way as well as a public way. I think we only recently started packaging what we have been doing over 6 years, so that we're trying to put it into one comprehensive, I guess, understandable, almost like advertisement, elevator speech. And to tell you the truth, it's impossible. Could you put World War II in an elevator speech? You can't do it. The wonderful thing about the Rosie the Riveter project is that the women, there are enough women still living to make this a living history, and for these women to tell their own stories, so that when they have gone, the rest of the country and into the future will really know exactly what these women did. Their valid history is so important. Up until the time we took this project, most of what had been done through the country, which was not very much, was to go in, interview a woman, and leave. Maybe there would be an occasional newspaper article or an occasional documentary film, that sort of thing. There's very, very little to involve the women. So our mission is to involve the women and to get people like you to be involved with the women to create projects that will last into the future. I want to introduce each of these ladies just briefly now, and then later we'll come back and let them tell each of their stories. First is Miss Dot Finn, and Dot is from St. Albans, West Virginia. She worked in a plant in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. She worked in the laboratory, and she has a wonderful, wonderful energy about her that I'm sure she's had from early on. Get on our website and look at this beautiful woman when she was 21. When you first started working, we were 21. 19. And we'll come back and let you tell your story. This is Buddy Cornude. Buddy is from upstate New York. She's a New Yorker.
West Virginia.
She's a West Virginia. Buddy grew up in upstate New York. Her father was a superintendent on the railroad. She basically didn't have a mother, and they grew up very poor. And she went to work at Curtiss-Wright Airplane Factory, riveting P-40s. P means pursuit, so as a lesson. B is for bomber, C is for cargo, P is for pursuit, and F is for fighting planes. And there are probably a whole bunch more, but those are the ones I know. The planes that she made in the factory were essentially stopped production at one point because their company was not making good engines, Curtiss-Wright. And she didn't know until recently that we found out about that, because an airplane crashed while she was working there as a riveter. And then she joined the Coast Guard, so she's both a veteran and riveter. And most important, she married a West Virginian. And part of her story, which she'll tell in a little bit, is that he was quite badly injured. He lost a leg and a mangled foot, and so she nurtured him both physically and through some serious mental stress, which we probably call PTSD today. But in any event, and this is Agnes Smith. Agnes has a family that came from Poland, settled in Pennsylvania near Pittsburgh. Her family was coal miners. When she went to work in Baltimore, she was eventually, and you'll hear some more detail, one of the first, if not the first, overhead crane operator. And the company that she worked for made piston rings, so we can't wait to hear the rest of that. But behind the scenes, and there's always a behind the scenes story with Rosie, so not just about work. One very important piece is that while she's working here in the United States, and really before we got involved in the war, her family was very worried about having to serve for Hitler. So two of the boys, and actually her uncles, went into the woods with axes, broke each other's ankles so that they wouldn't have to march in Hitler's army. We'll come back and let her tell you the story in a little bit.
What?
Just sit down and we'll tell you the story in a little bit. Gloria, do you feel like stand up? There she is. Gloria surprises. We didn't know she was coming. She's a coal miner's daughter, right? There you go.
Proud of it.
And proud of it. Gloria came to us as a really revved up Rosie who wanted to tell her story about riveting in Detroit, Michigan. One of the odd things that just happened today was about 4 years ago we got a call from North Platte, Nebraska High School, and the kids didn't have any Rosies. And they asked if we could help them find one and interview one. So we they interviewed her by teleconference, and we have it recorded, of course. And lo and behold, I heard from the kids from North Platte High School today. So, and it turns out at North Platte, that's famous to them because the railroad went through there and they made cakes and candies from their sugar factories. So we'll come back and tell your story in a little bit there. Okay, good. So Gladys, you just sit there. It's just fine. Gladys, we have been having a hard time finding African American roses. If anybody's got any ideas on that, please let us know. We know they're there. The possibility is that more have died than Caucasian women because of health or whatever, but we're not finding them. So we knew about Gladys probably 3 years before she let us do an interview, and that was about 1.5 years ago. We were so pleased to hear this story, and as I said a minute ago, Every Rosie story about the work is fascinating, and it adds to a piece of the fuller story of World War II. But the most important thing is that there is a fuller story even behind that. And her fuller story, the story behind the story, is that she grew up in Cabell County, West Virginia, with a serious, farming family and all that. And she had to go somewhere around 70 to 90 miles. How many miles did you have to go, Bud?
I guess it was about 90.
90 miles, one way, passing white schools all the time in order to get to school where she could go to school. When she was graduated from high school, her teacher, who was teaching in the summertime up in, riveting and working in an airplane factory in Detroit, encouraged her to come to Detroit, and she's got a very nice story about it, and also very much intertwined with the civil rights movement. And we're really glad to have her as part of the fuller story of the Rosie the Riveters. One thing we're gonna, since we have one extra Rosie than we expected this evening, we're gonna kind of speed things so we can get to the Rosie story, because that's what it's really all about. A couple of things I want to tell you about our organization is, one is that we have done, there's 6 years of work now, as I've said, I usually count it as September, because we did an interview, our first interview in September of 08. And then the newspaper, the Gazette, ran a full-page color ad for us on March 29th of 09, and we had 14 Rosies from that point on. So in that time period is the beginning. The big thing that makes us different than any other group in America is that we do projects. So these women decide, we want to make a park like they did in St. Albans. Or if we find a musician who comes to us and wants to write a Rosie song, they might write a Rosie song, but the words aren't right, they really aren't valid. And so we get the women involved, and we try to pass this history on by people like you being involved with the Rosies. We have 15 projects we've finished, we have 4 or 5 that we want to finish, and the really exciting news now is that we're considered a model for the country. We've been covered by Washington Post most recently, that was in August, the Today Show, the New York Times, and a couple of others that I've forgotten what they are. But the point is that I'm now talking with PR firms in New York and Washington, and I'm talking with many congressmen. I believe that Ben Cardin from Maryland is going to introduce in January getting the Congressional Gold Medal for the Rosie the Riveters. And so I think that we are succeeding in making this a project that West Virginia will always be known for. So you'll always be proud that we started it here, and no matter how it evolves or how many Hollywood films somebody else does or whatever, we really have awakened some conscience, and we have also done, I think, a serious amount of opening up the Rosie's own concepts that they can tell their own stories. We're going to show just a few minutes of the film, 6 or 7 minutes of our documentary film. This is one of our 15 projects. Just show you enough to, there are 2 or 3 points that I want to make that I think are best made by the film. The music is original music by West Virginia.
Times like those, you learn to be strong. You sacrifice a higher call you belong.
She grew up in Elkview and moved to Akron, worked in Akron and married there and stayed there.
to you. This is Rosie's song. Our best man set to foreign soil. Our best women drew up when the war.
Something about the bandana that people don't understand very often is if there was any hair at all showing, you could literally be scalped and bleed to death, depending on the kinds of tools that you use.
This is Rosie's song. There are many soldiers.
That was the first time we got two Rosies together, and I saw how wonderfully they got along. I was so pleased. This is Maisie Mullen. She lives in Clinton. This is Buddy. Hi, Buddy. Wave your arms, and you know. And this is after she joined the Coast Guard. And that's her husband, this was in Shepherdstown. This was the very first time any Allied nation ever said thank you to the American women who worked behind the scenes. This is Nancy Sybil. She was the Rosie I was closest to. She helped fight for the land for the park over in St. Albans, and she died a month before the park was over. Lockheed, California.
A bunch of us that went to high school together, about 6, got in the car and 2 cars, and drove off to LA and to work in the aircraft industry. And Cabell Precision Instruments was about a block long, 1-story factory building right on the outskirts of Lockheed aircraft. And they were building the big bombers, and they had 6 huge hangars. It was full. I did one at least a mile. So we were a very small factory, right, tucked into a huge aircraft factory, because they bought all of our hydraulic bodies. And hydraulic bodies on airplanes raise the landing gear and let it down. And on the bombers, it opens the bomb bays and closes them. And then the ailerons on the wings, you know, when you land, the ailerons go up like that. And on the tail portions of the aircraft are rolling down as well. So these hydraulic bodies are put in there to close and open all of these various things. I think one of the first gals, on other ships they had gals, so in the past they had not had women working that much in the factories. You know, we were supplying England, of course, that had been at war for about 4 years before we got in. And we were supplying them with, they were buying aircraft from us. And we were not in a war at that time. You must realize that after December the 7th, after Pearl Harbor, the whole thing changed tremendously. Of course, we were in a war then. We'd been attacked.
She married a Belgian diplomat, and she hasn't been able to get, she's basically housebound for several years now. Diane Koselleck was the very first Rosie I interviewed, and I realized I can't walk away. I cannot just say thank you.
I had 4 brothers, and I calculated at which age, but I knew he was going to have to go in service. And there was a fear come over me.
No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to an absolute victory.
For a lot of that time, I was with my sister. She was married. I stopped in her place. It was a Sunday. And that's when President Roosevelt came on the radio and told us, you know, we had been attacked.
She died 3 years ago, getting ready to come to. We also wanted the British who thanked American Rosies here, right here in the Charleston area. And she she died just a few days
To
before
be much of the
event.
determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph. So help us God.
I remember that I heard on the radio, there's big snow on, a big snow. And it seemed like there was a hurtful thing there with them shit and that's all.
Maisie made airplanes up in Akron, Ohio. She was a riveter.
They sent me.
Her
Uh,
boyfriend, she went to get married on leave,
Wartime,
and he died right before
almost
they
now
were to be
seems like,
married by 3 days.
but when I think of some of the things that we did, I don't know if we could repeat it today or not.
We are now in this war. We're all in it, all the way. Every single man, woman, and child is a partner in the most tremendous undertaking of our American history.
It's great. There's one thing I want to point out before we interview the women. To me, it's the most telling. Let's see, I left it here. Excuse me. Jimmy, can you hold this up for the crowd to see? This is great. This is Gladys's son, Jimmy. We're going to help her. That is a picture of D-Day. I kept trying to figure out how can we encapsulate, how can we, in other words, put in like one vision, one sentence, the power of what the women have done. There were 6 million women working on the home front, and there were 6 million men in combat. Now, there were more than men in the services, but there were 6 million men in combat, so it's equal number. That's D-Day. So we all know the war started in December 41. This is June 44. So 2.5 years passed between the time the women went to work in the factories and D-Day, which was really a surprise to Hitler. And every bit of equipment that's in that picture was made by women. Now, I'm not saying there weren't men in the factories, and they were important. And on occasion, you would find a woman who worked primarily with men, but by and large, the women worked with women, and they had 1 or 2 supervisors who were usually men. But that picture, to me, makes more statement. Can you imagine making all of them? The Goodyear blimps, we just interviewed a woman, took a woman to Parkersburg yesterday to make the Goodyear blimps. The only thing that you see missing in that picture is airplanes, because this was a sneak attack. And it wasn't until after the attack that the airplanes were really put in. But to me, that's the most powerful thing. And if anybody finds another photo or a way to essentially encapsulate the power of what the women did, we would really like to know. Now, we're going to be interviewing our ladies here, starting in with Dot. I think Dot is such a good spokesman, and she's got her own kind of gentle style. So instead of me asking her questions, I think I'm just going to give her the mic, and you just tell them about being at West Virginia University and going over and all, and going to Point Pleasant. Now, we do have about 9 minutes for each lady, and I'll let you know. You can talk to 9 minutes.
During World War II, I was a student at Morgantown. My voice will hold that.
Oh, you can.
During World War II, I was a student up in Morgantown, and the day that the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor was a Sunday morning. I came home from church, not home, but back to where I ate lunch. All the buzz was, we're at war, we're at war. Our nation has been attacked. You couldn't believe that next week how many empty seats there were. The male student population enlisted in all the services. each week I would go to class, there would be an empty seat. The next week, 2 or 3 empty seats. And the male population would dwindle down an awful lot by the end of the semester. That summer I went to my brother worked at the TNT plant at Point Pleasant, and got me a job in the lab there. My main job was to run ammonia conversions, and I gave my analysis to the man who kept the platinum screen, a huge platinum screen. He kept them clean, repaired, and replaced them when needed. We were mostly all ladies working in the lab. We did have a male supervisor. We parked in the parking lot. We took a bus to our area. As far as I know, we were not allowed, or at least we were never in any other part of the plant. But we went to we did our job, and it was an interesting job. Fortunately, I had chemistry, so I didn't have to have any extra training for my job. But during the war, it was hard to believe how this country pulled together. Everybody, we had one goal, and that was to win the war. And everybody in this nation, we pulled together. And there were sacrifices made. We had rationing. If I wasn't a big coffee drinker and my neighbor was, well, I would give them my coffee coupons and they would share my sugar coupons. Gasoline was rationed. If you students can imagine having just a few gallons of gas for the whole month, and that was all that you were allowed because it was rationed. This country, what amazed me was that we didn't hear any controversy. There wasn't any criticism, or it was just as though we all pulled together, and it was a great experience. And I'm just happy that we had a part helping it turn out the way it did.
And now, a couple things to point out here. First of all, she didn't really know exactly what she was doing. She knew she was making TNT. But if you ask Doc now, did you make TNT cakes? Did you make powder? I don't know. Did the TNT come from nitro? I don't know. So the real serious way that the American government and the Department of Defense, which was called the Department of War at the time, or the War Department, kept secrets was they just didn't tell the women what they were doing. So there are many, many times that the women have never even seen the airplane that they make the parts for.
The main ingredient was trinitrotoluene, and that was shipped in by barge, the Ohio River, and brought into
Yes, and you knew that. Yes, but you never saw the
I
end
didn't
product.
see the finished product.
Finished product. And now tell about your husband was a chemical engineer.
Yes, my husband was a chemical engineer with the General Chemical Company that built the plant. And he would go down on the riverfront and pick a bouquet of violets, and he would bring them up to the lab, and I would put them in a flask. He won my heart, and we were eventually married.
And you tell him that majoring in phys ed.
Well, my major going down was physical education, and after we got married and had 3 children, and after the last one left for school, I had a year and a half left, and I went back to state and finished up my degree there.
And she still plays golf. And she told me not to say she plays golf 3 days a week, because she was a few years ago, but you're not playing 3 days a week, is it?
Not 3 days a week.
No, but you're still playing. She's still playing. A couple things that I want especially students to be thinking about here. The generation generations in America are more separate than any country I've ever visited or been in. We have some foreign students here. Are you foreign students? No? Are you? No. Basically, in most countries, there's a lot more respect for the elderly than there is in America. And we've all known that, and we've all known where the Pepsi generation and the Mimi generation seems to be taking over and all that sort of thing. But something I want to say to all of the people here is that there's something about these stories that is essentially pulling people together. And when Doc talks about pulling together, I heard that theme so clearly, so quickly, that our mantra now is we pulled together, then we can pull together again. And one of the things we're hoping to do with our program is to get people to work on projects that tell about the Rosie's history, leave something behind. It might not, we may never make a national monument for Rosie's in the World War II Memorial, although we definitely are going to try. But we want every community in America to know they should be looking for and finding their Rosies and doing something that tells that behind the scenes the women have made a huge difference, not only in this war, but just through the history of humankind. Betty Canoe, you just take the mic and go away.
She has such statement. I joined the working force back in 1943. There was big signs, please come to work at Curtis Wright. Let's win this war. So I went, and we had to go to school for weeks at a time until we learned how to drill. They put a little square of paper up, a little dot in the middle. You had to learn to hit that perfect, or they didn't hire you. Also, you had to learn to rivet, which was very hard to get it straight in because there's someone on the back holding a bar. And they have to work the same time you are. If you made a mistake, if it went sideways, you had to walk up to the machine department and get a drill. And there you were not happy. You had to drill that out perfectly so they wouldn't have an oversized rivet to go in there. A lot of the girls wanted to look real pretty when they went to work. But we were told to tie our hair back. Quite a few girls leaned forward with a drill in their hand. They lost a lot of hair. But you had to listen to what you were told and do as you were told. I worked at that for a year and a half, and I thought, well, I'll join service and I'll go see the world. I joined the Coast Guard. We were in an all-male base. Couldn't speak to any of the men for 4 weeks. We didn't receive our uniforms until 4 weeks. Some girls came with high heels. It was January in Sheepshead, Brooklyn. It was cold. And every time they'd have us marching, I was short, so I was at the end. They'd call to the rear march, and I'd land on a piece of ice. Down I'd go, never fail. And our instructor, oh, he was a redhead, and he was so upset with us girls. We had one girl who could not keep time, could not march. We worked and worked with her, but she couldn't do it, and they sent her home. When we got discharged, not discharged, but sent to our future places to work, we got word she had committed suicide. It was one thing she wanted that money couldn't buy. She wanted to serve her country. They asked us where we wanted to be stationed. I said West Coast. I arrived in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Don't ever listen to it. Obey, but don't listen. And I was was in a clinic working, taking care of women. We were in a Ben Franklin hotel. There was Navy nurses there. There was Marines. There was blacks, all types. We treated them for minor illnesses. Some of our girls went out to the Philadelphia Naval Hospital, got to know some of the boys. I went once, met a Marine from West Virginia. He had one leg off and half of a foot. He borrowed his buddy's leg and walked on it before he got one of his own. He spent 2 years in the hospitals. He comes and I got discharged in 1947, January. And he comes to New York when he got out, walked up the steps at the hospital where I worked, and said, "You're coming to West Virginia." Guess where we got married? Funeral home in Canoa City. We looked in the phone book, and there was a river in Ashworth. We went to there, and we laughed when we saw the place. But there was no bodies there. And he married us. It lasted 60 wonderful years. He passed away in 2008 of cancer of the brain, lung, and leg. He was an ordained minister. The Lord wanted him to come back home to do something.
Isn't going to comment. All right. Thank you. So Agnes has a hearing problem, so I'm going to let her just kind of talk. Agnes, can you just tell your story?
Of what?
Tell your story of your work, your twisted rings and all of it, okay?
I should have brought it.
You should have. You should have. I didn't think you should have.
Well, I worked at a twisted ring division of Copper's Company.
I'll just stand here and hold it.
Okay, I'll hold it then.
Okay.
I worked for twisted ring division of Copper's Company, and in my department, we chromium plated piston rings. And they found that if you put one chromium plated piston ring in an engine, it doubles the life of an engine. So we had the foundry that made them, and then we had different sections of the plant where they did other things to them. But in my division, we put them on a harbor and squeeze them together and put a wedge in them and solder them together. And then we would put them on arbors and then on flat, and they were taken up and put into the different types of acid in order to chromium plate them. I did that for a while, but then when I went on another shift and we didn't have too much to do, the young men would say, "Come on up here and I'll show you how to drive a crane." So we had a crane. And so I drove over a crane on the midnight shift for quite a while. And then also they had a little truck, electric truck with a boom and lift. And they taught me how to drive the truck because it had a boom and lift. You couldn't break the electric eye in order to go into the next department. So you had to go around and turn it around and go out backwards. So I learned to drive backwards better than I could drive forward. Even after we got a car, I drive backwards better than forward. But I did that on the other shift. Then when I was put on the day shift, the manager called us all together, and he said that there were more men leaving for the service here's your license. So I was the first woman in the whole department plant that was a licensed crane and truck operator. So I did that for many years before I had to leave.
Agnes, tell them about your getting sick. Why did you quit working?
Oh, well, being up in the air with all the fumes and the, from all the different acids and all, I became quite ill, and it had been absorbed into my bloodstream, and so the doctor just told me I either had to walk out this week or they would carry me out the next week.
And also tell them about the size of the piston rings and what they were used for.
The piston rings were small enough I could put them on my little finger, or some of them were big enough that you could drive a car through it. They were used, the big ones were used for engines and ships.
And so now the chromium plating was to prolong the life of the engines. They were almost always used in engines.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And it was called Copper's Company,
Yeah.
and it's in Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
Is it
I
still?
don't know whether it's still there.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Thank you.
Gloria, I'm so pleased to see her because we didn't know she was coming. I didn't know. Gloria ended up being a secretary in school. And one of her favorite stories that I remember is she had a child that kept coming to her because everybody was bullying him. And she taught him to fight back. And you told him to fight back. You taught him, didn't you? Or whatever. I think that's the Rosie spirit. I'm just going to give it to you and you start talking.
I did not come to prepared to speak. I was surprised to Ann. But I've always got something to say. So, my name is Gloria, and I'm from Logan, but I'm a Rosie the Riveter. Very much for the Rosies. I think we done a good job. I left Logan when I was 17, right out of high school. The boys in their senior year, they were leaving and going to the service. Their mothers picked up their diplomas. The war was really going strong. This was in 1944. And everybody wanted to do their best for the war effort. And there was no difference in the girls and the boys. We wanted to do something too. So when I graduated, I had a sister and some cousins that had already gone to Detroit to work. But I was a nervous wreck leaving a small coal camp town and going to the big city. When I got off of the train in Detroit, I had never been so afraid in my whole life. Tall buildings and people and wide streets were new to me, and I was really terrified. To make a long story short, I wasn't old enough to go in the plant right at that time, so I got a job in the theater as an usherette. My sister said, now when you get off work, get on the right bus. What does the hillbilly do? Come out and get on the wrong bus. Go to the end of the line. Go to the end of the line and scared it absolutely to death. So the driver said, just get on the bus over there and go back and start all over again. Anyway, I finally got on. But when I went to the plant, I worked on the B-24s. Worked on the wing cone and the tail cone. This rivet gun, as Buddy said, was heavy. The bucket bar was heavy. And I'd say us ladies probably weighed 130 pounds. And we thought we were giants, of course. But riveting was a hard job. My hand was so swollen and sore that I would go home and my sister would put ice on it so that the swelling would go out. And I don't think people really realize to take a young person or an old person and go into a hard job like that. It was really tough. But we made it through and the war was finally over. But on this plane, I never thought I'd see one. And never did up until a year or so ago. I saw one rebuilt, a B-24, wonderful. And I had the privilege of taking a ride in it, riding in the cockpit. And I also had the privilege to sign the wing. This is an experience that was really something that will stay in my heart the rest of my life, I guess. But working in the big city like that was an experience. And we all felt like that we were helping the war effort. Plus, I had met this soldier. He was 19, I was 17, but I had plans for him. And I wanted him to get the war over and get back. So he went to Europe. He was in that Bastogne, was wounded there. But everybody knows what a terrible thing that was. The Nazis had the American soldiers, and Patton's troops went in to relieve them, the best I remember now. Anyway, he was in that group, but he came back. And we married, the plans I had for him. And we've raised 5 boys, I'm proud of. All good boys. My oldest son was in the Vietnam War. He spent 2 terms in Iraq. And with the help of the Lord, he came through and is sound and safe today. But anyway, to make a long story short, I'm 100% American. I love my country. And I had a doctor that was from France. And every time I go to this doctor's office, he salutes me. So I gave him a lot of material about the Rosies. Gave him a documentary. And when I go to his office, he just says, "Hello, little girl," and he salutes me again. He was in France. So he began to tell me how that the soldiers came and kept Hitler from overpowering them. So, you know, we did make an impact on the people in Europe. And we all have a friend. We had a friend. She died not too long ago. She was a Rosie in Europe. And she was telling us how that they would be riveting and the Germans would be bombing. And she said one day she decided not to go to work. And she said that her and her girlfriend just didn't go. And she said, would you believe they bombed that very place where she would have gone that day? She was a wonderful person, talked about the Americans and how wonderful they were. So people, we do have something to be proud of. You young people, the war was a terrible thing. You couldn't buy a pair of shoes, you couldn't buy sugar, you couldn't buy anything. You couldn't buy a car, you couldn't buy gas for it unless you had a ration stand. When this handsome man came home, we bought a car, only had 3 fenders on it. That was all that was available. So how many young people today would want to go around with a car with fruit vendors? Nobody would. But anyway, war is a terrible thing, and I hope none of you young people ever have to experience it. I also spent 25 years as a school secretary. I'm having flashbacks, all you young students in here. I loved every day I worked there. And I just wish all you young people and older people the best. Thank you.
You're telling another story about it while I was sitting there. Gloria, you have to tell the story about the rooming house. Now realize that I thought when I started this project that most of the women work near their homes, but it wasn't necessarily so. Now my mother did it. My mother worked at Poland Industries in Huntington. My mother would go to work in the morning, all dolled up and looking beautiful to me. I was born in '39, so I was 6 at the end of the war. And she would just be so beautiful and proud when she left and she walked to work. But when she would come back, she would hardly be able to walk. She'd stumble and she vomited most every evening. And it turns out that she was inspecting lenses. There was a machine inspection of the lenses, but she could pick up the lenses and see the flaws that the machine didn't get. So they put her on an inspection where she looked at the lens of the real world, the lens of the real world, and they made her dizzy, and she was sick all the time. She weighed 90 pounds, a little less than 90 pounds, and she was 5'7". And I'm not sure, it's hard to know why you do something in life, but I really think that somehow my mother is guiding this. And the fact that I never asked her what she did other than, little bits and pieces that I heard as a child never bothered me until I was living in Japan in the year '83, and I had to go to Korea to get a permit to teach English in Japan. And when I got back, I opened my mailbox and there was a letter there. The American Embassy had failed to notify me that my mother had died. And so my mother died totally unexpectedly, and I never asked her. So I'm still trying to put those pieces together, and one of the photos that I brought today is a photo of a woman doing inspection at Poland Industries. It's just a bit and piece, but all those pieces to me are really important. I'm going to ask Gloria to tell about the rooming house.
Ann always likes for me to tell this story because it is a very heartwarming story. I thought better standing. Anyway, this was a tragic thing that happened to me when I was in Detroit. I had a cousin and 2 cousins and a friend. My sister and I, we all lived in the same building, a boarding house. Early one morning, before I tell that, I had bought a fur coat of fake fur with my first payday. We all want fancy clothes and when we were growing up, so I bought this fancy fake fur coat. So this was Christmas morning, and I don't know, one of the girls was going home for Christmas, and she woke us up and tell us goodbye. Well, me and my sister got back in bed, and she went on and called the bus. So I was awake, and I smelled smoke. So I get up to move my coat. I didn't want it to get smoked up. Well, I opened the door to our room. The whole stairway was on fire. My sister and I lived downstairs. My cousins were all upstairs. There was no way out for us except the window. Anyway, my cousins were upstairs. But anyway, I broke the window with my hand and pushed my sister out. And then I got out. And my cousins weren't as fortunate as that. I had two cousins, two young girls. One was 18, the other was about 25. There was a girl from Kentucky killed. Her name was Laverne. The custodian of the building was killed also. The firemen got the sister, my cousins, out. They put us all in an ambulance. Anyway, going down to the hospital, my cousin was laying there. She was dead. Her watch was still running. But this was a terrible thing that happened to me in my time in Detroit. And you know, I realize now why nobody came out to help us. There was snow on the ground. We were barefooted in our night clothes. But later I realized maybe why nobody came to help us. In West Virginia, everybody would come to help you. But in Detroit, nobody came out. They were all out looking. But maybe because we were from out of the state, they knew nothing about who these people were living in that building. Maybe they were afraid to come out and help. I'm glad I realized that it kind of eased the feeling of my people, of the people up there, you know. But this was a sad time. We brought the girls home. But I felt sorry for my aunt. There was two of her darling girls. But anyway, this is a sad story that ended sad on my Detroit trip. Thank you.
And we are doing a book that the women started 3 years ago, and I'm very behind in finishing. We said to the women, let's do an ABC book. It wasn't actually my idea. And so we mailed out a letter to all the Rosies on our list and said, give us a concept for every letter of the alphabet. Something that seems to tell the story of the Rosies. What we came up with is A is for airplane, B is for bring our boys home, C is for conserving, D is for DJ, E is for energy, F is for factories and farms, G is for Goodyear blimp, H is for housing, and that whole thing of housing got to be, it's a consistent story that they went into a town often where they already had a cousin or some relative or friend, but they had to find housing. And boarding houses were a big part of how that happened. I is for inspection, J is for jitterbug, K is for Kilroy is here, L is for love letters, and her love letter is the focus of that. And it goes on. And one of these days, and if we got any students in here wanting to help us do this, it needs to be laid out better and just needs to be put online. It's going to take about probably 100 and 150 hours to do. Gladys, I'm going to pull up a chair or just stand here, sit here with you and interview you. I'll hold the mic and you just, why don't you just start talking?
My name is Gladys Mazur Dunkley Reese. I was born in Ellerton, West Virginia in 1922. I went to elementary school, a segregated elementary school. At that time, everything was segregated. I went to segregated school up until I graduated from high school and left the state and went to Detroit and got a job in the defense plant. the things that really I think people don't understand. They don't know about the segregation in West Virginia and a lot of other states. I lived in a town where they had a high school, but being segregated, you couldn't go. You had to get up about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and catch a bus to go to a school for Negroes. Everything was different. Even I was surprised when I left West Virginia and went to Detroit. And every place back then had some parts of it was segregated. You would go, they had theaters and other things that you could go to, even in Detroit. But you know one thing, I thank God that we had people like Martin Luther King to fight for us, to try to make things better. I never had no harm or no anything in my heart against any white person. But I knew that there were certain places that we couldn't go. We couldn't go to the theaters. We couldn't go no place. But you know one thing? In a long run, God will make everything change. We had to, during the war, they had, you would have to get shoes, to get tobacco, to get cigarettes, to get everything. Everything was rationed in the United States. But we could go to Canada and we could buy shoes, vegetables, anything that we wanted. I took my stamps that I got from the government and I would send them back to my sister where she could buy herself a pair of shoes or even buy cigarettes if she wanted to. I'm telling you, when you look back and see where we have come from, and we have so many good people. And then I worked in the plant, and I had good people to work beside. And I had people that was prejudiced. I had one young lady she was from Greece, and she didn't even want to work in the machine beside me. We would go for lunch, and she never went with us for lunch because she was prejudiced. She thought that she was more than we were. But I think kids today, you need to wake up and see what's happening in the world. I look back over my life, and I'm so proud that God let me see working in a plant, working where they had everybody, every nationality worked in this plant. And God let me live to see this. I think everybody should start to thinking about things. We the Rosies. I forgive all those white people that the way they treated me when I was a young person coming up. I couldn't go to their school, pass right by. And get up early in the morning, get up around sometime 2 o'clock in the morning to catch a bus to come from Winona and coming into Montgomery. And we passed all these high schools, junior highs, and everything, just because the color of our skin. We hadn't did anything to anybody. My father worked in the coal mines. But I can say this about where we worked. We were the only black family that lived in the white neighborhood in Elberton, West Virginia. But that was due to the man that owned the mines, and he, my father, was one of his good, I say servants, because that's what it was. But still, you have to change the hearts of other people, even though you can put you there. They still, the people that live there, they don't accept you. And all through my life, as long as I was young, and I was in Detroit, I stayed in Detroit even after the war was over. And I got sick and I came, my brother wanted me to come back. I had to have my fingers taken out. So I came back to West Virginia. And when I came back, certain things were still not in place. It was still, to an extent, it was still some segregation. But then I came back, and then I met my husband, and we got married, had 2 sons, and raised by 7 foster kids. Nobody knows what some people, you don't know what people go through. Some people go through. But you know one thing, there's a God in heaven that is watching over all of us. He watched over us during the war. Some of us came back. Some families came back. But he was there. He was watching over us, no matter what.
Something else I think that Gladys touched me with when we first interviewed her, and every time I see her, is she talks about going to the restaurants in Detroit. Somehow I missed this, and I grew up through that time. They didn't let them come in the restaurant. You had to go to a back door and order your food. Is that right?
And they would bring it to you.
And so now she was in Detroit, and she could get the bus to go to Canada within, 30 minutes, 20 minutes? And she could walk in any restaurant, any department store, or whatever. She was not able to even buy clothing here in Charleston at first. What was the name of the department store?
The Diamond and Carl Richardson, Stone and Carl.
And if we had more time, we'd get Jimmy to talk in here, because she spanked Jimmy one time, because Jimmy wanted to eat in establishment downtown, and he couldn't figure out why he couldn't have lunch, and she took a ping pong paddle, with the ball on it, and she paddled him. Goodness, is that what's wrong with you, Jimmy?
He wanted to know why.
Out of time here in a little
We were
bit.
in the store.
I do want to summarize a little bit here. First of all,
going there and buy him clothes or buy him anything else, and yet still you spend your money in there, and yet still you couldn't eat in there. They had a
you
cafeteria.
can spend your money, but you can't eat. I'd like to know a little bit about the audience. It looks like we have a couple of schools here. Am I right? Where are our young students from? Can you all tell me that?
George Washington High School.
Are all the young people here from George Washington? Well, I have to tell you, the coordinator, one of the teachers. Thank you. one of the things we talk about all the time, and I worry about all the time, is we are becoming more known through the nation, really. It's going to be hard to keep quality as a lot of people come to us. And I just keep thinking, I mean, this is one thing the women will always tell you. What about quality, buddy? It was quality.
That is what we work for, quality, and not to be fast. We had to do good work.
There was a woman that I took to Parkersville this week to the high school up there. Her name's Hilda Hume. She's from Gilmore County. And she tells a great story of being not only an inspector, but a senior inspector. And she was slowing up the work because she wasn't going to let, as she put it, garbage go to her boys. And they basically threatened to take her job. And on a Monday morning, they had a powwow, and inspectors flew in from the Navy and I think it was the Army. And she thought sure she'd been fired, and they called her to come in, and they said, congratulations, you're now the boss. So quality. The way I see it is quality, Q-A-L-I-T-Y. Q is quality over quantity. If 1 million people call us in this country and want us to help them, we can't do it. We can only do quality. U is for unity. A is for doing things that are achievable. Don't bite off more than you can chew. It has to be achievable. L is for levels of leadership, and that means age-wise and skill-wise and all that. It doesn't matter who you are. You can lead and be a leader in this project. I is for inspection. We always have to be sure that people know that if something's done under our name, we have to be able to come in and check it out. Q-A-L-I. T is for teamwork. And Y, that's what I was starting out to say. Y is for youth. We really need the young people of this country to keep working with us and finding ways. And it might be a small project, but you have to do it well. And one of the most enlightening things that I have come across in the almost 6 years I've been working on the project is that the young people, especially young women, really relate to these women. And that's where I started talking today, which was there's something about this project that's pulling people together. So we pull together, then we can pull together again. Or another phrase that is used constantly in the war, we hear from many women, especially in the Eastern Panhandle, is we pull better when we pull together. Are there questions as we're running into time? Yes, Nadine.
Question. The question is, we talked about Afro-American women being Rosies. The question is, were there women who were Rosies on the Tuskegee project? I have no clue, but I didn't ever tell the project.
And I don't know that, and so if you will help us find it, there's just zillions of details that we do not know. I did go to Howard University in Washington and asked them to do, if they could help us do some research on the women's involvement in World War II, and they basically don't have the time at this point. We need a grant, it's really what that's about. Did you have a question?
Okay, so you mentioned that one of these ladies had no family members that were like supposed to go to the Hitler Youth, but they didn't. Can you tell us what it was?
This is Agnes. Agnes, she wants to know about your uncles who were supposed to be conscripted into Hitler's army. She wants to, can you just tell about
One of my uncles just came home from the Polish army, and there was a letter for him from the from the German, from the Nazis wanting them to join that one. And he just couldn't do it. So he hid in the woods for several weeks. And then in the dead of the night, he came down, and across the street from my grandmother's was a chapel, and he slipped and went under the altar at the chapel because he knew that she came every day. So he stayed under that chapel. Nobody knew where he was except his mother, and he let her know. And so she brought him food under her cape, and in the evenings when she'd go to pray at the chapel. And he stayed there for 7 months before the war was over. Is that one or the other one?
Are there other questions? Yes, okay.
How old are they?
How old are they? Oh. You know, Nancy never would tell us how old she was.
Right.
Yeah, how old are you?
I'll be 91 in a couple weeks.
Oh, good for you. Remember, is that Thanksgiving?
I'll be 91 in June.
And she's born on the first day of spring. I don't know how old you are.
I'm 90.
90. When's your birthday?
April.
Okay, all right.
I'm 89, I'll be 90 in May.
I think she's the baby. How old are you, Gladys?
I'm 91, and I'll be 92 December the 29th.
December, did you say December 9th?
December the 29th.
Folks, let me just take, we have 3.5 minutes. I want to tell you about some of our projects. I think they're just so wonderful. We have original music. So if you've got any musicians, people who want to perform or create new music for Rosies, by October of next year, we hope to have enough original music that we can make a CD that nobody's, essentially original Rosie the music, original Riveter music. We have a Bluebird for Rosies project that is very popular. Can you hear me? When we began to interview the women, we kept hearing, I would always say to them, what music do you remember? Excuse me, and they would say, Bluebird of Happiness or Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And finally I heard it, and I heard the theme, and I said, what do bluebirds mean? And they said, hope. So we have a project that almost anybody can do. Now, bluebird is a North American bird. It represents hope in a lot of different, almost anybody you ask, it's something very constant. We started the Bluebird for Roses project here in Cabell County, and then when we thought we knew what we were doing, a mayor in Brunswick, Maryland, female mayor, said she wanted to be the first model Bluebird for Roses city, and they put in 20 bluebird houses with an expert in bluebirds. Monitoring was all the time through the summer months, and we then gave them an award for being the first model Rosie the Riveter Bluebird for Rosie, the first model Bluebird for Rosie City in America. Now, that coming around to awards. We give awards for people who do really good work, and it doesn't have to be big, but it has to be well done. And it has to be something that when people look at it, they recognize it's a good idea and it's very, very good quality. And so if you want to be part of the project and want some ideas, definitely we're open to that sort of cooperation. We've given 5 awards away to this point, and one of the next things we want to do is, and we have now a proposal, or mostly it's a business plan, don't laugh, but I'm very serious about it, is it's $7.3 million to build 4 model Rosie the Riveter communities, 8 around the country in 4 years. So in other words, we have the first model Rosie the Riveter community in America right here in Kanawha County. We've worked hard on that, and it's taken longer than I hoped, and the women are fading. And I would have thought we would have been where we are 2.5 years ago, but we have to do all we can do. So the next step is to say to people who have real money and companies that have real money, you know, we have a business plan now. We can tell you what we want to do every month. And by 4 years from now, we want to have 8 model Rosie the Riveter communities and or organizations or individuals. We have given an award to one individual around the country. So if you feel like you can do work that can model, be a model for others, we really want to hear from you. Thank you very much. I'm sorry. Schools, I include schools, absolutely. We have a high school in Winchester, Kentucky that I think is going to try to be a model. Thank you so much. Was there another question? No? Thank you so much.